I was 16 years old when my mother broke my leg with a metal rod because I tried on my sister's lipstick. The sound of that rod hitting bone still echoes in my nightmares, but what haunts me more is the smile on my sister Brooke's face as she watched. That night changed everything. It was the night I stopped being a daughter and became a survivor. If this story resonates with you, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts or your own experiences. Your support helps me continue sharing these stories. Let me take you back to the beginning, to show you how a girl who just wanted to be loved ended up lying on a cold bedroom floor, bleeding and broken. I was born on a Tuesday in March, during one of those rare spring storms that knock out power and flood basements. My mother told me this story exactly once, when I was 7, and she made sure I understood that my arrival had ruined her anniversary dinner reservations. Brooke, my sister, had been born on a perfect autumn day, with golden sunlight streaming through hospital windows and a string quartet my father hired playing in the hallway. Even our births were studies in contrast. Growing up in the Morrison household meant living in a museum dedicated to perfection. Our house sat at the end of Willow Creek Drive, a sprawling colonial with white columns and black shutters that made it look like something from a Southern Living magazine spread. My mother Eleanor had decorated it with the precision of someone staging a home for sale, every throw pillow positioned at the perfect angle, every surface gleaming and uncluttered. We had a formal living room that no one was allowed to use, a dining room where crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier, and a kitchen with marble countertops that stayed pristine because Eleanor forbade anyone from actually cooking messy meals. My father, Richard, was a partner at Henderson, Morrison, and Associates, one of those old-money law firms where memberships get passed down through generations. He wore suits that cost more than some people's monthly rent, and drove a Mercedes that he washed every Sunday morning with the dedication other men reserved for church. He had silver hair that he started going gray early, which only made him look more distinguished, and a smile he could turn on and off like a switch depending on who was watching. Brooke was their golden child in every possible way. She had inherited Eleanor's high cheekbones and Richard's height, creating a willowy beauty that turned heads wherever she went. By the time she was 14, she was modeling for local boutiques. By 15, she had a sponsorship deal with a regional activewear brand. She excelled at tennis, played piano at recitals where people actually paid to attend, and maintained a 4 gigapascals without seeming to try. Her bedroom was a shrine to her achievements, with trophies lining custom-built shelves, ribbons hanging from a corkboard that covered an entire wall, and framed newspaper clippings documenting her various triumphs. Then there was me, Harper Elizabeth Morrison, the second daughter who looked like she belonged to a different family entirely. Where Brooke was tall and blonde, I was short with mousy brown hair that refused to hold a curl. Where she had perfect skin, I battled acne that no amount of drugstore products could tame. Where she moved with the grace of someone always aware they might be photographed, I was clumsy, always knocking into furniture and spilling things at the worst possible moments. But physical differences were just the surface. The real chasm between us was how our parents treated us, a disparity so enormous and obvious that even strangers noticed it, though they rarely said anything. After all, who confronts a respected lawyer and his elegant wife about the way they talk to one of their children? I remember being 8 years old and asking my mother why Brooke got ballet lessons, and I didn't. Eleanor had been arranging white roses in a crystal vase, and she didn't even look up when she answered. Because Brooke has natural grace and you have 2 left feet. Why would I waste money on lessons you'd fail at? She said it the way someone might comment on the weather, casual and matter of fact, as if crushing a child's dreams was just another item on her to-do list. When I was 10, I won second place in the school science fair with a project about water filtration. I was so excited I practically floated home, clutching my red ribbon like it was made of gold. Richard was in the living room reading the Wall Street Journal, and I burst in to show him. He glanced at the ribbon for maybe 2 seconds before returning to his paper. "Second place is just first loser," he said. "Let me know when you actually win something worth celebrating." That same year, Brooke came in 5th in a tennis tournament, and we had a celebration dinner at the nicest steakhouse in town. Eleanor ordered champagne, Richard gave a toast about perseverance, and Brooke basked in their attention like a flower turning toward the sun. I sat at the end of the table, invisible, pushing around a piece of chicken I didn't want, wondering what I would have to do to earn even a fraction of their pride. The pattern continued through middle school and into high school, each year adding new layers to the invisible wall between Brooke's life and mine. When homecoming season arrived in my sophomore year, Brooke spent weeks shopping for the perfect dress, dragging Eleanor through boutiques in the city, trying on dozens of options before settling on a midnight blue designer gown that cost more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. I watched them leave for these shopping trips from my bedroom window, Eleanor's laughter floating up as they climbed into the car, a sound I rarely heard directed at me. When I asked about getting a dress for the same dance, since a boy from my English class had awkwardly asked me to go, Eleanor looked up from her magazine with an expression of mild surprise, as if she'd forgotten I might want to participate in normal teenage activities. "You can wear one of Brooke's old dresses," she said, turning the page. "The black one from last year should work if you take it in at the waist. There's a sewing kit in the hall closet." I spent 3 evenings after my diner shifts teaching myself to alter that dress, my fingers clumsy with the needle, the fabric bunching in places where it shouldn't. The dress had been stunning on Brooke, hugging her willowy frame perfectly. On me, even altered, it hung strangely, emphasizing all the ways my body didn't measure up to hers. I went to the dance anyway, spent the evening feeling like an imposter in borrowed finery, and came home early to find the house dark and empty. Brooke was at an after-party. Eleanor and Richard had gone to the country club. No one had waited up to ask me how my night was. Then came the birthday that crystallized everything. I woke up on Brooke's 16th birthday to the sound of commotion outside. Looking out my window, I saw what looked like a parade gathering in our driveway. Richard stood there in his weekend casual clothes, grinning wider than I'd seen in years. Eleanor had clearly spent the morning decorating, because there were balloons tied to our mailbox and a banner strung across the garage door that read, "Sweet 16 Brooke," in elaborate script. And in the center of the driveway sat a white BMW, so new it still had the dealer plates, with an enormous red bow tied across the hood like something from a commercial. Neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, tipped off by Eleanor's carefully orchestrated social media posts. When Brooke emerged from the house in her silk pajamas, her hair somehow perfect despite having just woken up, everyone cheered. I watched from my bedroom window as she screamed with delight, as Eleanor hugged her and wiped away tears of joy, as Richard handed her the keys with a speech about responsibility and how proud he was of his successful daughter. Cameras flashed. Videos were taken. Brooke sat in the driver's seat and honked the horn, and everyone laughed. It was a moment designed for their holiday card, for their social media, for proof of what a perfect family they were. That evening, they took Brooke to her favorite restaurant, a place downtown that required reservations months in advance and had a dress code. I wasn't invited. I worked my shift at the diner and came home to an empty house, eating leftover meatloaf alone in the kitchen while imagining them toasting Brooke with expensive wine, Eleanor allowing her a sip because it was her special day. 6 months later, my 16th birthday arrived on a Tuesday. I woke up hoping for something, anything, that might show they remembered. There was no fanfare, no decorations, no gathering in the driveway. Eleanor was already dressed and drinking her morning coffee when I came downstairs. She slid a card across the kitchen counter without looking up from her phone. "Happy birthday," she said absently, her thumb scrolling through something on her screen. Inside the card was a generic message printed by some machine at the store, nothing handwritten except her signature. And tucked inside was a $20 bill with a post-it note stuck to it. In Eleanor's precise handwriting, it read, "Buy yourself something practical. Not something you want, not something special, something practical, like socks, like shoelaces. Like the absolute bare minimum you'd give to someone you were obligated to acknowledge but didn't actually care about." I stood there in the kitchen, holding that card, doing the math in my head. Brooke's car had cost at least $40,000. My entire birthday acknowledgement cost $20, and whatever the card had cost, probably $3 at most. That was the monetary value my mother placed on celebrating my existence. $23 compared to $40,000. The ratio felt like a precise calculation of my worth in this family. "Thank you," I said, because what else could I say? Eleanor finally looked up from her phone. "You're welcome. Don't spend it all in one place." She said it like it was a joke, like $20 was an extravagant amount that I might foolishly waste. The following month, Brooke got her own credit card, an American Express with no spending limit, presented to her over dinner with another speech from Richard about building credit and financial responsibility. I watched her slide it into her designer wallet and knew that single piece of plastic represented more trust, more investment, more belief in her future than I would ever receive. Meanwhile, I continued to wear Brooke's discarded clothes, items she deemed so last season or not really my style anymore. When I tried to buy myself a new pair of jeans with money I'd earned at the diner, Eleanor saw them and frowned. "That's wasteful, Harper. You have perfectly good pants. You need to learn to be grateful for what you have. Some children don't even have a roof over their heads, and here you are spending money on clothes when you should be saving for your future. Unlike your sister, you're going to have to work for everything you get." The implication was clear. Brooke deserved to have things handed to her. I deserved to struggle. Brooke deserved brand new BMWs and unlimited credit cards. I deserved hand-me-downs and lectures about gratitude. And I was supposed to accept this disparity as natural, as earned, as justified by some fundamental difference between us that everyone could see except me. But I adapted. Children are remarkably resilient, capable of normalizing even the most abnormal circumstances. I learned to make myself small, to anticipate Eleanor's moods and adjust my behavior accordingly, to celebrate Brooke's achievements with genuine enthusiasm because that was the only way to participate in family joy. I learned that if I kept the house clean without being asked, if I never complained about being hungry, if I stayed out of the way when they had guests, I might earn a few moments of something resembling approval. I got a job at 16, working weekends at Rosie's Diner, a greasy spoon near the highway that served truckers and travelers. The pay was minimum wage and the work was exhausting, standing for hours, taking orders, and refilling coffee cups. But I loved it. At the diner, I was just Harper, a hard-working girl who smiled at customers and never messed up orders. Mrs. Rosie, the owner, was a grandmother of 6 who treated me like I mattered. She made sure I ate during my shifts and called me honey in a way that felt genuine. Sometimes I would stand in the walk-in freezer during my break, pretending I needed to get something, just to cry where no one could hear me. I was saving money for college because Eleanor and Richard made it devastatingly clear that their financial support had a favorite. Brooke could choose any school in the country and they'd write the check without hesitation. For me, they had a different plan, which Eleanor announced one evening while flipping through a college brochure Brooke had brought home. "Brooke has real potential," she said, not even looking at me. "Full ride to any school she wants. You're more of a community college type." She said it the way someone might observe that the sky is blue. A simple fact that required no discussion. Nothing wrong with that, of course. Plenty of people do just fine with associate degrees. The unspoken message was clear. Brooke deserved investment. I deserved to figure it out myself. The money I earned disappeared into a shoebox under my bed. $37, then $62, then $115. Every crumpled bill represented hours of work and a ticket to somewhere else, somewhere I could breathe and exist without constantly calculating how to be less burdensome. By the time I was 16 and a half, I had saved almost $300. I had also developed an elaborate system of survival. I knew Eleanor was most volatile between 4 and 6 in the evening, when she'd had enough wine to loosen her tongue but not enough to make her sleepy. I knew Richard was most approachable on Sunday mornings before his run, though his approachability was relative and mostly meant he might grunt in acknowledgement if I said good morning. I knew Brooke enjoyed my humiliation most when she had an audience, so I avoided being around when her friends visited. That October evening started unremarkably. I had worked the lunch shift at the diner, my feet aching in the cheap sneakers I'd bought from Walmart. A trucker had left me a $15 tip, the best of my day, and I folded it carefully into my pocket, already mentally adding it to my shoebox fund. The sky was that particular shade of autumn gray that promised rain, and the air had that crisp quality that made me think of new beginnings, though I had no reason to hope for one. I walked home, my backpack heavy with textbooks I needed to study from. I was taking AP classes despite Eleanor's comments about me being mediocre at best intellectually, determined to prove I could at least achieve something academic. My grades were good, not straight A's like Brooke's effortless perfection, but solid B's and occasional A's that I earned through late nights and sheer willpower. The house was quiet when I entered through the side door, the one that led into the mudroom where we kept shoes and jackets. I could hear the television in the den where Richard was probably watching the news, and the distant clink of dishes from the kitchen where Eleanor was likely preparing dinner. Brooke's car wasn't in the driveway, which meant she was out with her boyfriend Tyler, a college freshman whose family owned a chain of car dealerships. I climbed the stairs to my room, passing family photos that documented our carefully constructed lie. There was last year's Christmas card photo, all of us in matching cream sweaters and jeans, smiling at the camera. If you looked closely at my face, you could see that my smile didn't reach my eyes, but no one ever looked that closely. There were photos from Brooke's tennis matches, from her piano recitals, from family vacations to places like Martha's Vineyard and Hilton Head. I was in some of them, always slightly out of focus or cut off at the edge, like a photobomber who accidentally made it into the final print. My room was at the end of the hallway, the smallest bedroom in a house with 6 bedrooms. It had been the original maid's quarters when the house was built in the 1950 seconds, which felt appropriate given my status in the family hierarchy. The furniture was mismatched, pieces that had been replaced in other rooms and relegated to mine. The bed was a twin with a metal frame that creaked when I moved. The desk was old and scratched, salvaged from Richard's office when he upgraded. The dresser had a broken drawer that I had learned to open at a careful angle. But I had tried to make it mine, covering the walls with pages torn from library books about places I wanted to visit someday. Paris, Tokyo, New Zealand, anywhere that wasn't here. I dropped my backpack on the bed and sat down, pulling off my sneakers and rubbing my sore feet. Through the thin walls, I could hear Eleanor's voice rising in frustration about something, probably burned food or a stain on the tablecloth, one of those minor catastrophes that seemed to define her existence. I heard Richard's measured response, the tone of a man who had learned to pacify his wife with minimal effort, and then silence. I should have stayed in my room. I should have done my homework and kept my head down and followed the unspoken rules that governed my survival. But that evening, something pulled me out into the hallway. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the faint smell of expensive perfume wafting from Brooke's room. Maybe it was the exhaustion of always being invisible making me reckless. Brooke's door was open, which was unusual. She normally kept it closed and locked, as if whatever treasures lay inside were too precious for common viewing. I stood in the doorway and looked into a room that was less a bedroom and more a testament to privilege. Her bed was queen-sized with a tufted velvet headboard in soft gray. Her desk was white lacquer with gold hardware, organized with color-coded supplies and a laptop that was top of the line. Her closet was a walk-in that had been renovated the previous year, complete with custom shelving and lighting that made it look like a high-end boutique. But what caught my attention was her vanity. It sat against the wall beneath a window that overlooked the backyard, a beautiful piece of furniture with a large mirror surrounded by light bulbs like something from a movie star's dressing room. The surface was covered with makeup, expensive brands that I recognized from magazine advertisements. Urban Decay, Too Faced, Dior, Chanel, tubes and compacts and palettes that probably cost more than my entire savings. And there, catching the light, was a tube of lipstick. It stood out among the others because it was open, balanced on its cap, the color visible. It was a soft rose pink, the kind of shade that looked natural but enhanced, like a secret that made the wearer seem effortlessly beautiful. I don't know what possessed me to walk into that room. For 16 years, I had been the good daughter who followed rules and accepted my place. But in that moment, standing in the doorway of my sister's palace while I lived in a glorified closet, something inside me cracked. It wasn't rebellion, not really. It was exhaustion. I was tired of being invisible, tired of being less than, tired of accepting that I didn't deserve beauty or kindness or nice things. I walked to the vanity and picked up the lipstick. Dior Rouge. The tube was weighted and luxurious in my hand, solid and expensive in a way that my drugstore mascara would never be. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, really looked, seeing the girl I never let myself examine too closely. My face was tired, with dark circles under my eyes from working and studying late into the night. My skin was broken out along my jawline. My hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail because I didn't have time to style it before work. I looked worn down, beaten, like someone twice my age. I uncapped the lipstick and brought it to my lips. The color glided on smoothly, creamy and pigmented. I watched as my reflection transformed, just slightly, just enough. The pink brightened my face, made me look healthier, younger, almost pretty. For 30 seconds, I saw a different version of myself, one who went to parties and had friends and didn't spend Friday nights reading used textbooks by lamplight. I was so absorbed in this fantasy that I didn't hear her approach. Eleanor's voice cut through my reverie like a blade, sharp and cold and furious. "What do you think you're doing?" I spun around, the lipstick still in my hand, and found my mother standing in the doorway. She wore dark jeans and a cashmere sweater, her signature pearl earrings, her hair perfectly styled in that way that looked effortless but probably took an hour. Her face was contorted with an anger that went beyond simple displeasure. This was rage, pure and primal, and it was directed entirely at me. "I was just trying it on," I stammered, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. "I'm sorry. I'll put it back. I was just—" "You were stealing?" Her voice was low and controlled, which was somehow worse than if she had yelled. "You were taking something that belongs to your sister and trying to pretend you're something you're not." "I wasn't stealing, I was just looking." "Don't lie to me." She stepped into the room, and I instinctively backed against the vanity. "You think I don't know what this is? You're jealous. You've always been jealous of Brooke because she has what you'll never have: beauty, talent, worth." Each word hit like a physical blow. I had heard variations of this speech before, in smaller moments, in throwaway comments, but never delivered with such concentrated venom. "Mom, please, I just wanted to see what I looked like. You look pathetic." She was close now, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something floral and expensive that probably cost more than I made in a month. "You look like a cheap imitation trying to play dress-up with things you'll never be able to afford. Brooke works hard for nice things. She's beautiful and successful, and people want to invest in her future. You're a burden. You're an obligation. You're the mistake I've had to tolerate for 16 years. I felt something break inside me, some small piece of hope I didn't even know I'd been carrying. "Why do you hate me so much?" The question came out as a whisper, and I immediately regretted asking it. You don't ask questions when you're not sure you can handle the answers. Eleanor's face shifted, and for a moment I saw something flicker across her features that might have been regret, or possibly just irritation that I had spoken at all. "I don't hate you, Harper. Hate requires energy, passion, emotion. I feel nothing for you. You're just there, taking up space, consuming resources that could go to your sister. Do you know what it costs to keep you fed and clothed and housed? Do you know what we could do with that money if we didn't have to waste it on you?" Behind her, I saw movement. Brooke had arrived home without me noticing, and she stood in the doorway now, her perfectly highlighted blonde hair catching the light, her designer jeans and cashmere sweater somehow making her look casual and elegant simultaneously. She leaned against the doorframe with her arms crossed, and the smile on her face was one of pure satisfaction. "Oh my God," Brooke said, her voice dripping with amusement. "Is that my Dior lipstick? Mom, she's using my Dior." "I see that," Eleanor replied without taking her eyes off me. "Harper, stay exactly where you are." She turned and left the room. The sound of her footsteps going down the stairs was measured and calm. Brooke pushed herself off the doorframe and walked into the room, circling around me like a predator studying prey. She picked up the lipstick from where I had dropped it on the vanity, examined it, and made a disgusted sound. "You got your poor person germs all over it," she said, dropping it into the wastebasket beside the vanity. "I'll have to buy another one. You know this costs $65, right? That's probably like a whole week of your pathetic diner tips." I wanted to tell her it was closer to 2 weeks, actually, but I kept my mouth shut. Brooke picked up a makeup wipe and cleaned the surface of the vanity where my hands had touched it, making a show of her disgust. "You could have just asked, you know," she said conversationally. "I might have given you some of my old stuff, the drugstore brands I used to wear before I could afford the good things. But no, you had to sneak in here like a thief and contaminate my space." She examined her reflection in the mirror, touching her hair, turning her face to different angles with the practice of someone who spent a lot of time studying their own image. Although honestly, even the best makeup couldn't help you. Some people are just born lucky and some people are born you. I heard Eleanor coming back up the stairs, and my blood went cold. There was something about the steadiness of her footsteps, the deliberate pace, that scared me more than yelling would have. Brooke heard it too and turned toward the door with an expression of eager anticipation, like someone waiting for their favorite show to start. Eleanor entered the room carrying something, and it took me a moment to recognize what it was. A metal rod, maybe 3 feet long and an inch in diameter, with rust spots near one end. It was one of the garden stakes Richard used for his tomato plants, heavy-duty and solid. "Mom, what are you doing with that?" My voice came out high and thin, barely above a whisper. Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She tested the weight of the rod in her hand, bouncing it slightly, and her face held that same calm expression she wore when she was planning a dinner party or arranging flowers. This was the most terrifying thing about the moment, the complete lack of emotion in her eyes, as if what was about to happen was just another task on her list of things to accomplish. "Brooke, close the door," Eleanor said quietly. Brooke's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something that might have been uncertainty, but it passed quickly. She pulled the door shut, sealing us in. The click of the latch was unbearably loud in the silence. "Sit down on the floor," Eleanor commanded. "Stretch your legs out in front of you." "No." The word escaped before I could stop it, and I saw Eleanor's expression harden. "This isn't a negotiation, Harper. You took something that wasn't yours. You need to learn that actions have consequences. Now sit down." "Please, Mom." I was crying now, tears streaming down my face, the pink lipstick probably smudged into a grotesque mask. "I'm sorry. I'll never touch Brooke's things again. I'll pay for the lipstick. I'll work extra shifts. Please just—" "You'll do exactly as I say." Her voice never rose above conversational volume, which made it infinitely more frightening. "You'll sit down, stretch out your legs, and you'll learn what happens when you steal." I looked at Brooke, silently begging her to intervene, to tell our mother this was crazy, to remember that we were sisters and that had to mean something. But Brooke just watched with that same eager expression, and I realized with horror that she was enjoying this. My legs gave out, whether from fear or some instinctive obedience I'd been conditioned to over years of trying to please them, I don't know. I sank to the floor, my back against the vanity, and slowly extended my legs in front of me. They were shaking so badly I could see my jeans trembling. "Please," I tried one more time. Mom, I'm so sorry. I'll never do anything wrong again. I promise. Please don't hurt me. Eleanor raised the metal rod, and I watched it rise in what felt like slow motion. I saw the rust spots and the dents from being driven into hard ground. I saw Eleanor's hand, with its manicured nails and wedding ring that caught the light. I saw Brooke in my peripheral vision, leaning forward slightly, not wanting to miss a single second. And then I saw the rod come down. The pain was beyond anything I had imagined pain could be. It was white-hot and all-consuming, radiating from my shin up through my entire body, exploding behind my eyes and stealing my breath. I heard a sound, a scream that tore from my throat and didn't sound human, the kind of sound that should have brought neighbors running and police cars screeching to a stop. But nobody came. I collapsed onto my side, my hands clutching my leg, unable to form words or thoughts beyond the pure animal agony. Through tears that blurred my vision, I saw Eleanor standing over me, the rod still in her hand, her face as calm as if she had just pruned a rosebush or folded a load of laundry. She crouched down beside me, so close I could feel her breath on my face. "You'll remember this," she whispered. "Every time you take a step, every time your leg aches, you'll remember that you took something that wasn't yours. You'll remember your place in this family." She stood up and extended the rod toward Brooke, like someone passing a kitchen utensil. Brooke took it, examined it with clinical interest, turning it over in her hands. Then she let it drop to the floor beside me, where it clattered against the hardwood. "Pathetic," Brooke said, shaking her head. She stepped carefully around me, avoiding the blood that was starting to seep through my jeans, and walked out of the room. Eleanor followed without another word, leaving the door wide open. I could hear their footsteps going downstairs, hear the sound of voices, casual conversation, a laugh from Brooke at something I couldn't make out. Life was continuing downstairs as if nothing had happened, as if I wasn't lying on the floor of my sister's bedroom with my leg shattered and my heart broken beyond repair. I don't know how long I lay there. Time lost all meaning in the face of pain that was so complete it became my entire world. The room grew darker as the sun set outside the window, shadows lengthening across the floor. At some point, I became aware of a wetness on my face and realized I was still crying, silent tears that ran down my cheeks and pooled on the hardwood. Eventually, the initial sharp agony dulled to a throbbing ache that pulsed with every heartbeat. I could think again, fragmentedly, in bits and pieces. I needed help. I needed a hospital. I needed someone to care that I was hurt. But who? I pulled my phone from my pocket with shaking hands. The screen was cracked, probably from when I fell. But it still worked. I could call 911. I could tell them what happened. But then what? Would they believe me? Would anyone believe that Eleanor Morrison, president of the PTA and volunteer coordinator for 3 different charities, had beaten her daughter with a metal rod over lipstick? Or would they see a dramatic teenager making up stories, seeking attention, causing problems for a nice family? And even if they believed me, what then? Foster care? Being shipped off to live with strangers? Was that better or worse than this? I heard a door open and close somewhere in the house. Footsteps on the stairs, lighter than Eleanor's, quicker than Richard's. Brooke appeared in the doorway, and for one absurd moment, I thought she had come to help me. But she was just retrieving something from her nightstand, a bracelet she'd forgotten. She glanced at me the way someone might glance at a stain on the carpet, with mild distaste and no real interest. "You should probably clean that up before it stains," she said, gesturing vaguely at the blood. "Mom will be pissed if you ruin her floors." Then she left again, and I heard her car start in the driveway, heard her drive away to wherever she was spending her evening, probably meeting Tyler for dinner at some restaurant where the appetizers cost more than my weekly paycheck. Using the edge of the vanity for support, I managed to pull myself up to my knees, then my feet. My right leg screamed in protest, unable to bear weight, and I had to hop on my left foot while holding onto furniture. The journey to my room, normally a 10-second walk, took me nearly 5 minutes. Each movement was agony. each hop sending fresh waves of pain through my body. In my room, I collapsed onto my bed and stared at the ceiling. The water stain above my window was shaped like a rabbit, something I'd noticed years ago during another night of crying myself to sleep. I focused on that shape now, tracing its outline in my mind, anything to distract from the pain. My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Rosie asking if I could pick up an extra shift tomorrow. I stared at the message, at the normalcy of it, and wanted to laugh or scream or both. Tomorrow I was supposed to go to school, to work, to smile and pretend everything was fine. Tomorrow I was supposed to keep living like my mother hadn't just broken my leg over makeup. I heard Eleanor's voice drifting up from downstairs, probably positioned near the stairwell so I would hear. If you think about walking out that door looking for sympathy, don't bother coming back. No one out there will believe you, Harper. You're just a troubled teenager with a flair for drama. And if you can't appreciate the home you have, you certainly won't survive out there. It was a challenge and a threat rolled into one, delivered in that same calm tone she had used while beating me. That night was endless. The pain was relentless, evolving from sharp agony to deep throbbing ache and back again. My leg had swollen to the point where my jeans cut into the skin, but I couldn't get them off without moving in ways that made me want to vomit from pain. I drifted in and out of something that wasn't quite sleep, more like consciousness taking brief vacations from the suffering. When the first light of dawn crept through my window, I forced myself to move. Using my desk chair as a crutch, I managed to stand on my left leg. My right leg hung useless, the slightest pressure sending lightning bolts of agony through my body. But I made it to my door, then to the hallway, then to the stairs. Richard was in the kitchen, dressed in his running clothes, drinking a protein shake and checking his phone. He looked up when I hobbled in, taking in my swollen leg and tear-stained face, and his expression shifted to annoyance. "What did you do now, Harper?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "What happened?" Not a single note of concern. Just immediate assumption that whatever state I was in was somehow my fault. Mom hit me. My voice was hoarse from screaming and crying. She hit my leg with a metal rod because I tried on Brooke's lipstick. Richard set down his protein shake and looked at me with the same expression he probably wore when reviewing disappointing legal briefs. "Then you probably deserved it." The words hung in the air between us. In that moment, I understood with perfect clarity that I had no father. I had a man who lived in my house and shared genetic material with me, but I had no father. "She broke my leg, Dad. I need to go to the hospital. I think it's fractured or broken and—" "Stop being dramatic." He picked up his phone again, dismissing me. "Eleanor knows what she's doing. If she felt you needed that level of discipline, then you must have done something to warrant it. Put some ice on it, take some ibuprofen, and stop trying to cause problems." He headed toward the door, then paused. "And Harper, don't provoke your mother. She has enough stress managing this household without you adding to it." Then he left for his run, stepping out into the cool morning air, leaving me standing in the kitchen on one leg, broken in more ways than one. I stood there for a long time after he left, processing the totality of my abandonment. My mother had beaten me, my sister had watched with pleasure, my father had told me I deserved it. I had no one. In a house with 3 other people, surrounded by neighbors and community, I was completely and utterly alone. The realization was strangely freeing. I hobbled back upstairs and opened my closet, pulling down the shoebox with my savings. $237. It wasn't enough for an apartment or even a motel room for more than a few nights, but it was something. I grabbed my school backpack and emptied out the textbooks, replacing them with clothes, my toothbrush, phone charger, and the one photo I owned of my grandmother, my dad's mother who had died when I was 10. She had been the only person who ever made me feel wanted, who called me on my birthday and sent cards with $5 bills tucked inside. Sometimes I wondered what she would think of how her son turned out, whether she would recognize the man who could ignore his daughter's broken leg. Before I left, I went back to Brooke's room. The metal rod was still on the floor where she had dropped it. I picked it up, feeling its weight, seeing the dark stain near one end that might have been rust or might have been my blood. The rage that flooded through me was white-hot and clarifying. For 16 years, I had tried to earn their love. For 16 years, I had made myself small and quiet and grateful. And all it had gotten me was this rod and a broken leg and the knowledge that I was nothing to them. I took the rod into the hallway, and, using every ounce of strength I possessed, I bent it. It took all my weight, all my fury, all my pain, but slowly, impossibly, the metal gave way. When I finished, it was curved and useless, warped beyond repair. I carried it to Eleanor's room, that perfectly decorated sanctuary with its white duvet and tasteful art, and I put it under her bed where she would find it eventually. "You'll remember this too," I whispered to the empty room. Then I left. I went down the stairs, each step an exercise in agony that made spots dance in my vision. I went out the side door, not the front where neighbors might see, and I walked away from the only home I had ever known. The walk was torture. My legs screamed with every hop, every awkward shuffle. Sweat poured down my face despite the cool morning air, and at least twice I had to stop to vomit into bushes from the pain. But I kept moving because staying meant accepting that this was my life, that I would endure years more of their cruelty, and I simply couldn't do it. I made it 3 blocks to Riverside Park, a small green space with playground equipment and a few benches. I collapsed onto one of the stone benches near the swings and tried to catch my breath. The park was nearly empty at this early hour, just a mother pushing her young daughter on the swings. The little girl laughed with pure joy each time she reached the peak of her arc, and the mother laughed with her, encouraging her to go higher. I watched them through tears I didn't remember starting to cry. The little girl had wild brown curls and wore pink rain boots even though there was no rain. The mother had a worn face but a genuine smile, the kind of smile you couldn't fake. They were happy in this simple moment, finding joy in an ordinary morning at the park. The little girl noticed me watching and waved enthusiastically. I waved back weakly. She called out something to her mother, who glanced over at me with that mix of concern and wariness that adults wear when they see something that doesn't look quite right. I could see the moment she registered my swollen leg, my tear-stained face, the obvious signs of distress. She started walking toward me, her daughter's hand clasped firmly in hers. I panicked. I couldn't explain. I couldn't answer questions. I couldn't risk her calling the police and sending me back to that house. So I stood up, nearly collapsing from the pain, and I hobbled away as quickly as I could manage, which wasn't very quick at all. Behind me, I heard the woman call out, asking if I needed help, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I wandered for another hour, moving slowly through streets I'd walked my entire life but now saw with new eyes. Every house looked like mine from the outside, well-maintained facades hiding whatever truths lived inside. How many other kids were trapped behind those pretty doors? How many other families wore masks of perfection while rotting from within? Eventually, I found myself on Commercial Street, the less polished part of town where small businesses struggled to compete with chain stores. There was a laundromat, a Chinese takeout place with faded menus in the window, a tattoo parlor that definitely wasn't inspected regularly, and wedged between a pawn shop and a vacant storefront, Lydia's Thrift Treasures. I had passed this store countless times on my way to and from the diner but had never gone inside. The window display was cluttered but somehow charming, with vintage dresses on mannequins and old books stacked into precarious towers and mismatched tea sets arranged on lace doilies. A hand-painted sign above the door advertised gently used goods and fresh starts. I don't know why I opened that door. Maybe it was the fresh starts part of the sign. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the desperate, primal need to be somewhere that wasn't a street or a park bench. Whatever the reason, I pushed open the door, heard a cheerful bell chime, and stumbled inside. The store smelled like old books and lavender, a combination that was oddly comforting. Every available surface was covered with items, organized in a way that suggested a system known only to whoever ran the place. Racks of clothes lined the walls, sorted by color and creating a rainbow effect. Shelves held everything from kitchen supplies to board games to inexplicable collections of ceramic cats. A worn velvet armchair sat near the counter, and that's where I headed, my body making the decision before my brain caught up. I collapsed into the chair and immediately understood why someone had donated it. One of the springs was broken and poked up at an uncomfortable angle, but I was past caring about comfort. I was past caring about much of anything except the fact that I had made it here, wherever here was, and I could stop moving for a moment. "Sit down before you fall down," a voice said. I looked up to find a woman behind the counter. She was maybe 60 or 65, with silver hair pulled back in a practical bun and eyes that were a startling shade of green. She wore a flannel shirt over a vintage band t-shirt and jeans that were splattered with paint. Her face had the kind of wrinkles that suggested a life full of laughter, the kind you earned through joy rather than stress. She brought me a glass of water without asking if I wanted it, and a crocheted blanket that she draped over my shoulders even though the store wasn't particularly cold. Then she went back to what she had been doing, sorting through a box of donated books, giving me space to exist without pressure or questions. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes, sipping water and trying to remember how to breathe like a normal person. The woman worked quietly, occasionally humming snatches of songs I didn't recognize. Eventually, she spoke again without looking up from her sorting. "I'm Lydia. I own this place. You running from something or towards something?" The question was so direct, so honest, that I found myself answering truthfully. "I don't know. Maybe both." She nodded like that made perfect sense. "You need a job?" I blinked, certain I had misheard. "What?" "A job. Can you sort through donations, organize inventory, work a cash register?" "Yes, but my leg, I can't really." "Wasn't asking about your leg. Was asking if you can work." She finally looked up from her books and studied me with those sharp green eyes that seemed to see more than I wanted to reveal. "I pay minimum wage, cash daily if you need it. You can work whatever hours you want around school, and there's a storage room in the back with a cot if you need a place to stay for a while." I stared at her, completely overwhelmed by this sudden kindness from a stranger. "Why would you help me?" Lydia set down the book she was holding and leaned against the counter. "Because 30 years ago, I was a girl with a broken arm and nowhere to go. Someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. I'm paying it forward." She paused. "You want the job or not? I'm not going to ask questions you don't want to answer, but I also won't have you sleeping on park benches if I can do something about it." "Yes." The word came out strangled by the sob that followed it. "Yes, please." And just like that, I had a sanctuary. It wasn't much, that storage room with its concrete floor and walls lined with boxes of inventory waiting to be sorted. The cot was old and the mattress was thin and probably violated several health codes. The bathroom was tiny with a toilet, sink, and a shower that only produced lukewarm water on its best days. But it was mine. It was safe. And for the first time in 16 years, I was in a space where someone actually wanted me there. Lydia didn't ask about my family. She didn't push for explanations about my leg or why I showed up looking like I'd been through a war. She just gave me a chance to exist without judgment. That first day, she showed me how the cash register worked, how to price donations using her system of color-coded stickers, how to arrange window displays to catch the eye of passing pedestrians. She brought me lunch from the Chinese takeout next door, chicken lo mein and an egg roll, and made sure I ate even though I insisted I wasn't hungry. That evening, after the store closed, she drove me to a free clinic in her ancient Honda that had more than 200,000 miles on it. The clinic was in a converted house on the edge of town, run by volunteer doctors and nurses who dedicated a few evenings a week to treating people without insurance. We waited for 2 hours in a room with folding chairs and outdated magazines, and I watched the other patients, people who looked tired and worried and grateful to be there at all. When it was finally my turn, A doctor who couldn't have been much older than 30 examined my leg. Dr. Sarah Chen, according to her name tag. She was gentle but thorough, her hands careful as she palpated the swollen tissue around my shin. She asked how it happened, and I gave her the lie I had prepared. I fell downstairs. She looked at me with eyes that said she didn't believe me at all, but she also didn't push. "This should have been treated immediately," she said quietly. "It's a fracture, and from the swelling and bruising, I'd say it happened at least 12 to 18 hours ago." She paused, weighing her words. "Falls downstairs usually result in multiple injuries, scrapes, and bruises from the impact. Your injury is isolated to one specific point, consistent with a blow from a narrow object." I said nothing, just looked at the floor. Dr. Chen sighed. "I'm going to set this and put you in a cast. It's going to heal, but because of the delay in treatment, you might have some permanent issues. Probably a limp, possibly chronic pain, increased risk of arthritis in that area as you get older." She met my eyes. "I'm a mandated reporter, which means if I believe a minor has been abused, I'm required by law to report it. But I'm also a doctor who knows that sometimes the system causes more harm than help. So I'm going to ask you directly, are you safe right now, wherever you're staying?" I glanced at Lydia, who was sitting in the corner of the examination room, reading a magazine but clearly listening. "Yes," I said. "I'm safe." Dr. Chen followed my gaze and something passed between her and Lydia, some unspoken understanding. "Okay," she said finally. "Let's get this leg fixed up then." The process of setting and casting my leg was its own kind of torture, different from but comparable to the original injury. Dr. Chen gave me local anesthesia, but it only did so much. I bit down on a towel and tried not to scream as she manipulated the broken bone back into alignment. Lydia held my hand through the whole thing, and I squeezed so hard I was probably cutting off her circulation, but she never complained. When it was done, I had a bright blue cast from my knee to my ankle and a set of crutches that were slightly too tall for me. Dr. Chen gave me instructions for care, a prescription for pain medication that she said the clinic would fill for free, and a follow-up appointment in 6 weeks. In the car on the way back to the thrift store, Lydia spoke for the first time since we'd left the clinic. That doctor was right about reporting. If she had filed a report, Child Protective Services would have gotten involved. They would have investigated your family, and based on what happened to you, there's a good chance they would have removed you from the home. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. But CPS is overwhelmed and underfunded. You might have ended up in foster care, which can be a gamble. Some foster families are wonderful. Some are worse than what you left. The system is broken in a lot of ways." She pulled into the parking lot behind the thrift store and turned off the engine. "I'm not saying this to scare you. I'm saying this so you understand that you have options, but none of them are perfect. You can stay here as long as you need to, while you figure out what comes next." That night, lying on the cot in the storage room, surrounded by boxes of donated items waiting to be sorted, I cried harder than I had since the injury. But these tears were different. They weren't just pain and fear anymore. They were relief and gratitude and grief for the family I should have had but never would. They were tears for the little girl I had been, who tried so hard to be good enough. And they were tears for the woman I was going to become, someone who survived this and came out stronger. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a routine that felt surreal in its normalcy. I woke up in my storage room and got ready using the tiny bathroom. I worked at the thrift store before school, taking the bus since walking was still difficult with crutches. At school, I told anyone who asked that I had fallen and broken my leg, and most people accepted the explanation without question because why would they doubt it? After school, I went back to the thrift store and worked until closing, learning everything Lydia could teach me about running a business, about pricing and customer service and inventory management. My phone continued to buzz with messages from Eleanor for the first week. They started concerned, or at least pretending to be concerned. "Where are you? Come home so we can talk about this." Then they shifted to annoyed. "You're being ridiculous. Stop this drama and come home. Then angry. Fine. Stay gone. See if I care. And finally, nothing. The silence from my family was deafening, but it was also exactly what I needed. I went to school. I worked at the store, and slowly I started to heal. Not just my leg, though that was healing too, but something deeper inside me. I had spent 16 years trying to earn love from people incapable of giving it. I had twisted myself into impossible shapes, trying to become someone they might value, and all I had gotten was pain and disappointment and a broken leg. But now, living in a storage room and working in a thrift store, I felt more at home than I ever had in that mansion on Willow Creek Drive. 6 weeks after I left, Dr. Chen removed my cast at the follow-up appointment. My leg looked pale and slightly shriveled from being immobilized, and there was a thick scar running along my shin where the rod had impacted. The bone had healed, but not quite straight, leaving a subtle bump you could see if you knew to look for it. When I stood up and tried walking without crutches, I immediately noticed the limp. My right leg didn't quite work the same way anymore, a slight hitch in my gait that Dr. Chen confirmed would probably be permanent. The fracture healed, but the trauma to the surrounding tissue and the delay in treatment caused some permanent changes, she explained. You'll be able to walk, run, live a normal life. But yes, you'll always have that limp. Some people might not even notice it, but you'll feel it. She paused. I'm sorry. If this had been treated immediately— It's fine, I interrupted, because it was. The limp was proof that I had survived. Every time I took a step, I would remember that I had made it out. That seemed like a fair trade. Lydia suggested I start volunteering at the Riverside Community Center, the same park where I had watched the mother and daughter on the swings that first morning. The center ran programs for kids in the neighborhood, after-school activities and summer camps and weekend events for families who couldn't afford expensive entertainment. You've got a gentleness about you, Lydia said one evening as we closed up the store. Those kids could use someone like you in their lives. So I started spending my Saturday mornings at the community center, which operated out of an old building that had been a church decades ago. The main room still had beautiful stained glass windows, though several panes were cracked or covered with plywood. Folding tables and plastic chairs filled the space, and the walls were decorated with children's artwork and handmade posters advertising various programs. I helped with whatever needed doing, reading to younger kids, teaching basic sewing to middle schoolers who wanted to customize their clothes, organizing craft supplies, supervising homework time. The kids were a mix of backgrounds and circumstances, some from stable homes, some from situations that probably mirrored my own. But at the center, they were just kids being kids, and I was just Harper, the volunteer who walked funny but always had time to listen. It was there, surrounded by children's laughter and the organized chaos of community programs, that I started to truly heal. One little girl in particular attached herself to me, a 6-year-old named Destiny with wild curls, missing front teeth, and an opinion about everything. She was curious and fearless and full of questions, exactly the kind of kid I wished I could have been. One Saturday, she asked about my limp while we were setting up for story time. Why do you walk funny, Miss Harper? I knelt down to her level, balancing carefully. The question didn't hurt the way it might have a month earlier. I got hurt once. My leg healed, but it didn't heal perfectly straight. Destiny processed this with the seriousness only children can bring to such topics. She reached out and touched my leg where the scar was visible below my shorts. Her small fingers gentle. My mom says scars show you survived something hard, so your walk is like a superhero walk. You're a superhero who lived through something bad. Her words hit me with unexpected force, and I felt tears sting my eyes. You know what? I said, my voice thick with emotion. You're absolutely right. It is a superhero walk. Destiny beamed, showing the gap where her front teeth should be, and ran off to tell her friends that Miss Harper was a superhero. And as I watched her go, I felt something shift inside me, some fundamental understanding that I wasn't broken. I was a survivor. And my limp, my scar, wasn't evidence of weakness. It was proof of strength. The weeks turned into months. Summer arrived, hot and humid, and I celebrated my 17th birthday quietly in the storage room with a cupcake Lydia brought from the grocery store bakery. Eleanor's last message had been 3 months ago, a brief text that said, "Fine, stay gone," with no follow-up. Brooke hadn't tried to contact me at all. Richard's silence was absolute. It was like I had been erased from their lives as completely as if I had never existed. Sometimes I wondered if they even told people I was gone. Did Eleanor explain my absence at PTA meetings? Did Richard mention it to his law partners? Did Brooke tell her friends her sister had run away? Or did she just pretend I had never existed at all? The questions bothered me less than I expected. Their silence was its own kind of answer. I was working the afternoon shift at the thrift store on a Tuesday in August when the bell above the door chimed and Eleanor walked in. I didn't recognize her immediately. The woman who entered looked nothing like the polished, perfectly put-together mother I remembered. This woman was thin, gaunt even, her expensive clothes hanging loosely on a frame that had lost too much weight too quickly. Her hair, usually styled to perfection, was pulled back in a messy ponytail with visible gray roots. Her face was deeply lined, new wrinkles carved around her eyes and mouth that aged her a decade. She saw me behind the counter and stopped, her hand still on the door handle, and for a long moment we just stared at each other. "Harper," she said finally, her voice rough and uncertain. "What do you want?" I kept my tone neutral, professional, the same voice I used for any customer. She let the door close behind her and walked further into the store, her movements tentative like she was navigating unfamiliar territory. "I need to talk to you. I'm working. Please, just 5 minutes." Lydia emerged from the back room, drawn by voices or maybe by some sixth sense that this was important. She assessed the situation instantly, her sharp eyes moving between Eleanor and me. "Harper, why don't you take your break now? I've got the register." I almost argued, but something in Lydia's expression told me this was necessary. I nodded and came around the counter, walking past Eleanor and out the front door. She followed, and we stood on the sidewalk in the August heat, the sun beating down mercilessly. "You look different," Eleanor said. "So do you." She flinched at that. "Your father left, back in March. There was another woman, someone from his firm, younger. He emptied half our bank accounts and filed for divorce." She spoke quickly, the words tumbling out like she'd been rehearsing them. "Brooke moved to New York in June. She got an opportunity with a modeling agency. She doesn't call anymore. She said she can't be associated with scandal." I waited, saying nothing. Eleanor seemed to expect some reaction, but I had none to give. "The house is so quiet now," she continued. "Too quiet. I keep thinking about that night, about what I did." Her voice cracked. "With the rod. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have hurt you like that." I felt nothing, no satisfaction at her suffering, no vindication that her perfect life had fallen apart, no pity for her circumstances. Just a vast emptiness where my need for her approval used to live. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't what?" "Don't apologize because you're lonely. Don't apologize because Dad left and Brooke abandoned you. Don't apologize because you finally understand what it feels like to be unwanted." I took a step back, creating more distance between us. "You're not sorry you hurt me. You're sorry you're alone." "That's not true." But the protest was weak, and we both knew it. "Harper, you're my daughter. I love you." The laugh that escaped me was sharp and bitter, surprising even myself. "You broke my leg because I tried on lipstick. You watched me bleed on your floor and felt nothing. You told me I was a burden, a mistake, pathetic. You said you felt nothing for me. Those were your exact words." I feel nothing for you, so don't stand here now and tell me you love me." Eleanor reached for me, and I jerked away so violently I nearly lost my balance. The instinctive recoil, the spike of fear that shot through me even after months of distance, made her hand drop to her side. She saw it. The evidence that her abuse had left marks deeper than the scar on my leg, and something broke in her expression. "I understand," she whispered. "I understand you hate me. I don't hate you." The realization hit me as I spoke the words, and they rang with truth. "I don't feel anything for you anymore. You're just a woman who used to hurt me. You have no power over me now. Please come home. I'll do better. I'll be different. We can be a family again." "Home?" I shook my head slowly, deliberately. "You call the place where you beat me until I couldn't walk home? That was never home. It was a prison, dressed up as a perfect family photograph." Eleanor's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks, her careful makeup smearing into dark tracks. She looked older than I'd ever seen her, worn down by consequences that had finally caught up to her. "What do I do now? I'm alone. I have no one. Your father took everything. Brooke won't return my calls. The lawyers are saying I might lose the house. Everything I built is falling apart." "You'll remember this," I said softly, echoing her own words back to her from that terrible night. "You'll remember the daughter you destroyed because she wanted to feel pretty for 5 minutes. You'll remember the family you poisoned with your cruelty. And maybe, somewhere deep in whatever remains of your conscience, you'll remember that you had choices. You could have loved me. You chose hate instead. You chose cruelty instead. You chose to break your own daughter rather than admit your own failures." I turned and walked back into the thrift store, my superhero walk steady and sure despite the heat and the emotion and the trembling in my hands. Through the window, I watched Eleanor stand there for a long moment, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Then she walked to her car, a much older model than the luxury SUV she used to drive, and sat there in the driver's seat with her head on the steering wheel. Eventually, she drove away, and I went back to work. That evening, after Lydia closed up the shop, she made us tea and we sat in the worn armchairs near the counter. "You did good today," she said. "That couldn't have been easy." "It was easier than I expected," I admitted. I thought seeing her would bring back all the fear, all the pain, but mostly I just felt distant, like I was watching something happen to someone else. "That's growth," Lydia said. "You've done the work of separating yourself from their toxicity. You've built a life that doesn't revolve around earning love from people incapable of giving it. That's huge." I sipped my tea, thinking about Eleanor's appearance, her tears, her pleas. Do you think she really understands what she did? Lydia considered the question carefully. "I think she understands she's suffering consequences. Whether she truly understands the pain she caused you, that's harder to say. Some people are capable of genuine change and remorse. Others are only sorry when their actions finally catch up to them." She paused. "But here's the thing, Harper. It doesn't matter. Her understanding or lack thereof doesn't define your healing. You don't need her to get better for you to be okay." The wisdom in those words settled over me like a blanket. For 16 years, I had believed that if I could just make them see me, really see me, everything would be okay. But I didn't need their validation anymore. I had survived despite them, not because of them. The next morning, Detective Miller came to the thrift store. He was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, and he showed me his badge before asking if we could talk. Lydia gave us privacy in the back room, and I sat on my cot while he pulled up an old folding chair. "I'm following up on a report we received several months ago," he said, pulling out a notebook. "One of your former neighbors called in a noise complaint back in October, said they heard screaming coming from your house. The call was noted but not pursued at the time, which was a failure on our part. Recently, we received additional information that prompted us to investigate more thoroughly." I said nothing, just waited. We executed a search warrant on your family's home last week. We found a metal rod, bent and damaged, hidden under a bed. We also have medical records from the free clinic documenting a fractured leg consistent with a blow from a narrow object. Doctor, Chen reported your case as suspected abuse, which she's legally required to do. He met my eyes. I need to ask you directly. Did your mother, Eleanor Morrison, assault you with that metal rod? The truth sat on my tongue, heavy and powerful. For months, I had carried this secret, protecting Eleanor despite everything she had done. But as I sat there in the storage room that had become my sanctuary, looking at this detective who was actually trying to help, I realized I didn't owe her silence. Yes, I said. On October 15th of last year, my mother hit me with a metal garden stake because I tried on my sister's lipstick. She broke my leg. My sister Brooke watched and encouraged it. My father, Richard, was told about it the next morning and said, I deserved it. Detective Miller wrote everything down, his pen moving steadily across the page. Why didn't you report this when it happened? Because I was 16 and terrified, and I didn't think anyone would believe me over them. Because they're respected in the community and I'm just a kid. Because the few times I tried to tell people about how they treated me, I was told I should be grateful for what I had. I paused. And because I know how the system works, I've seen enough true crime documentaries to know that unless there's overwhelming evidence, these cases go nowhere. He nodded slowly. You're not wrong about the challenges, but we have physical evidence, medical records, and your testimony. That's substantial. He flipped to a new page in his notebook. I need to warn you, this is going to be difficult. Your mother will likely face charges of child abuse, possibly felony assault, depending on the prosecutor. There will be court proceedings, possibly a trial. You'll have to testify, relive this publicly. It won't be easy. Nothing about any of this has been easy, I said. But yes, I'll testify. I'll tell the truth about what happened. The investigation moved forward with the slow, grinding efficiency of the legal system. Eleanor was arrested and charged with aggravated child abuse and assault. Richard was questioned but not charged, though his reputation took a significant hit when details of his response to my injury became public. Brooke, living in New York and claiming ignorance of the full extent of the abuse, avoided legal consequences but found herself dropped by her modeling agency when the story made local news. The trial happened 8 months after I left that house, in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and floor polish. I sat on the witness stand in a borrowed dress that Lydia helped me pick out, and I told my story to a room full of strangers. I described the years of emotional abuse, the constant comparisons, the way I was made to feel like a burden. I described that October evening in detail, the lipstick, Eleanor's rage, the metal rod. I described the pain and the fear and Richard's dismissal the next morning. Eleanor's lawyer tried to paint me as a troubled teenager seeking attention, but the evidence was too substantial. The medical records, the bent metal rod, testimony from Dr. Chen and Detective Miller, even statements from neighbors who admitted they had heard screaming but hadn't known what to do about it. The prosecution presented a clear narrative of systematic abuse culminating in violent assault. When the verdict came back guilty on all charges, I felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just exhaustion and relief that it was finally over. Eleanor was sentenced to 3 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 months, plus mandatory counseling and a permanent record that would follow her forever. Her perfect image was shattered beyond repair. I didn't attend the sentencing hearing. Lydia went in my place to represent my interests, and she reported that Eleanor had looked small and broken in her orange jumpsuit, a stark contrast to the powerful woman who had once ruled our household with cruelty disguised as discipline. Life moved forward. I graduated high school with decent grades and a scholarship to the local community college where I studied business management. I continued working at the thrift store and volunteering at the community center. My 17th birthday came and went, then my 18th, And with that milestone came legal independence and the permanent end of any parental claims on my life. On my 19th birthday, Lydia offered me a partnership in the thrift store. "I'm not getting any younger," she said matter-of-factly, "and you've proven yourself capable. I think we could expand, maybe open a second location, but I need someone I trust to help run things." I accepted, and suddenly I wasn't just surviving. I was building something. We opened Lydia's Thrift Treasures East in a vacant storefront near the community college, specifically targeting students who needed affordable furniture and clothes. The business thrived, and for the first time in my life, I felt proud of something I had created. 4 months after the new store opened, on a Saturday morning at the community center, Destiny ran up to me with her usual enthusiasm. She was 8 now, with the same wild curls but newer front teeth, and she had become something of a shadow, always helping with the younger kids, always full of ideas for activities and projects. Miss Harper," she called out, her voice carrying across the main room. "You're walking like a hero again today." I laughed, a real laugh that came from somewhere deep and genuine. Other kids had picked up on Destiny's superhero walk commentary over the years, and it had become something of a running joke at the center. But for me, it was a reminder every single day that I had survived, that I had transformed pain into strength. "Every day," I told her, like I always did. Every single day. Later that afternoon, after the community center programs ended, I walked back to the original thrift store to help Lydia with closing procedures. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, and the late summer air was just starting to cool from its daytime heat. My phone buzzed with a text from Destiny's mom, thanking me for working with her daughter and saying how much my presence meant to their family. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at the thrift store with its hand-painted sign and cluttered window displays, thinking about how far I had come. From a broken girl with no place to go to, a young woman building her own business and making a difference in her community. From someone who felt like a burden to someone who had value and purpose. The scar on my leg was still visible, a thick line running along my shin that showed white against my tanned skin. The limp was still there, that slight hitch in my gait that marked me as different. Some days my leg ached, especially when the weather changed, or if I'd been on my feet too long. Dr. Chen had been right about that, but I didn't hate these reminders anymore. Every step I took, every day I walked forward, was proof that I had survived something terrible and chosen to thrive anyway. My mother would remember what she did every day she sat in that prison cell. She would live with the knowledge that she had destroyed her family through her own cruelty, but her punishment wasn't my responsibility. I had given her enough of my life, my pain, my tears. Now I was giving those things to myself. I was learning what it meant to be loved, starting with learning to love myself. I was building a life on my own terms, one careful step at a time, each one a little steadier than the last. I was creating a family of choice, people like Lydia and Destiny and the community of volunteers and customers who filled my days with purpose and connection. I never fixed the rod. I never fixed my mother. I never fixed the past. Instead, I fixed myself. And that was the only thing that truly mattered. The scar would never disappear. The limp would always be part of how I moved through the world. But these weren't marks of weakness or shame anymore. They were proof that I had faced darkness and found my way to light. My mother wanted me to remember. She wanted every step to remind me of what she could do to me, of how powerless I was, but she had gotten it backwards. Every step reminded me that I survived her. Every step reminded me that I was stronger than her worst cruelty. Every step reminded me that I had chosen healing over hatred, growth over revenge, and a future over a past. As I walked into the thrift store that evening, my superhero walk carrying me forward, I felt lighter than I had in years. This was my life now, built on my terms, filled with chosen family and meaningful work, and the knowledge that I had survived the worst and come out better for it. What would you do if you found yourself in a situation like Harper's? Have you ever had to walk away from someone who was supposed to love you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of survival and strength. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who might need to hear them.